How the pursuit of pleasure can ruin our lives. Aldous Huxley and modern slavery. Imagine a society where no chains are needed, no tyrant raises a whip, and no soldier enforces obedience. The people are free, at least in appearance. They can laugh, they can play, they can consume endless entertainment. And yet, beneath this surface of joy lies a quiet kind of slavery. A slavery of the mind, wrapped not in pain but in pleasure. Aldous Huxley warned us that the future would not be ruled by those who take away our books, but by those who make us so distracted and comfortable that we no longer care to read them. It would not be a boot stamping on the human face forever, but rather a sweet drug, soma, dopamine, endless novelty, that makes us forget the very meaning of freedom. This is not fiction. It is our world, unfolding in real time. The pursuit of pleasure has become the silent engine of control. We scroll, we click, we buy, we crave, all the while believing we are choosing freely. But are we? Or have we built our own prison out of comfort and distraction? If these questions stir something in you, stay with me. In this video, we'll trace the warnings of the Stoics, revisit Huxley's vision, and uncover how the pursuit of pleasure quietly erodes freedom in our daily lives. We'll also explore how Stoic wisdom can help us build relationships rooted in strength, not need, and charisma born from discipline, not performance. If you value critical thought and want to see the structures shaping your life more clearly, consider subscribing and joining this exploration. Because freedom begins not with pleasure, but with awareness. The ancient warnings against pleasure, the story of humanity's struggle with pleasure, is as old as philosophy itself. Long before Aldous Huxley warned us of a world subdued by entertainment and comfort, ancient thinkers recognized the hidden dangers of indulgence. They saw that pleasure, while sweet in the moment, often conceals chains that quietly bind the human spirit. To them, the threat of enslavement did not always come from kings, armies, or empires, but from the subtle seduction of desire itself. The Stoics, in particular, were relentless in their warnings. Epictetus, who began life as a literal slave before rising to become one of the greatest philosophers of his time, understood bondage in both its physical and psychological forms. He taught that real freedom is not simply doing what one wants, but mastering what one wants. No man is free who is not master of himself, he wrote. To him, the pursuit of pleasure without discipline was not liberty but another form of captivity. When a man cannot resist wine, approval, or luxury, he is not free. He is owned by the very things he craves. Seneca, another Stoic voice, sharpened the warning with vivid metaphors. He described pleasure as honey spread on the edge of a knife. Sweet to the taste, but dangerous to linger upon. His writings reveal an acute awareness of how the human mind clings to what feels good, ignoring the silent cost. Pleasure often appears harmless at first. It relaxes, soothes, and rewards. But little by little, dependence forms. When dependence deepens, autonomy weakens. For Seneca, this made unchecked pleasure one of life's most cunning traps. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome, sat at the summit of human power, wealth, and luxury. Yet, in his meditations, he constantly reminded himself to remain vigilant against the very comforts that surrounded him. He saw indulgence as more dangerous than assassination plots or invading armies. Soldiers and rivals threatened only his life. Pleasure threatened his soul. He wrote of mornings when the temptation was to stay in bed, wrapped in warmth, choosing ease over duty. His response was to confront himself. You were born to work with others, not to indulge in sleep. To him, discipline was not a denial of life but a refusal to waste it. Even outside Stoicism, the dangers of pleasure were recognized. Early Christian thinkers echoed similar warnings, cautioning that unchecked desire estranged man from higher purpose. Augustine confessed that his youthful pursuit of pleasure left him restless, perpetually unsatisfied, and further from truth. In his view, pleasure alone could never fill the void of meaning. It promised fulfillment but delivered only temporary distraction, leaving the soul thirstier than before. Across these traditions, a shared theme emerges. Pleasure, when placed above virtue, becomes a form of slavery. It might not shackle the body, but it enslaves the will. It turns humans into predictable creatures, easily led by those who control the supply of satisfaction. A ruler, after all, need not rule with violence if he can govern through indulgence. Give people their bread, their games, and their distractions, and they may never notice their freedom quietly eroding. But these warnings were not only abstract. They were intended as practical guidance for daily living. The Stoics did not merely preach about resisting pleasure, they practiced it through deliberate exercises. They embraced voluntary discomfort. Wearing simple clothes, eating plain food, or even sleeping on hard surfaces to remind themselves that comfort was optional, not necessary. By testing themselves against discomfort, they weakened the grip of desire. They learned to enjoy pleasure without being mastered by it. These practices also shaped how they related to others. In relationships, the Stoics believed that attachment driven purely by desire or neediness was fragile and corrupting. A love dependent on pleasure is a love that withers when pleasure fades. Instead, they sought to ground relationships in virtue and respect. In this sense, their teachings can still be applied today. To build meaningful connections, one must value the character of the other rather than the gratification they provide. This transforms love from a transaction into a partnership of integrity. Charisma, too, was not for them a game of manipulation or performance. True influence came from self-command. Marcus Aurelius radiated authority not through theatrics but through his calm presence and discipline. Epictetus taught that the one who governs himself inspires trust and admiration in others, far more than the one who tries to impress. The Stoic model of charisma was quiet strength, the magnetic draw of a person who is not owned by pleasure or fear. These lessons remain startlingly relevant. We live in an age where desires are constantly cultivated, manipulated, and monetized. Advertising whispers promises of pleasure in every corner of life. Social media lures us with likes and validation. Entertainment platforms keep us scrolling, streaming, and consuming without pause. And like the citizens of Rome attending their circuses, we often surrender our agency without resistance. The philosophers of the past would see this as the very slavery they warned against, chains hidden in plain sight, disguised as choice. The Stoic alternative is difficult, but liberating. It is the conscious decision to master oneself, to choose principle over impulse, and to cultivate strength over indulgence. In doing so, one becomes less predictable, less manipulable, and more authentically free. Thus, the ancient voices offer us a warning and a path forward. Pleasure is not to be despised, but to be treated with suspicion. It is a guest, not a master. Enjoy it when it comes, but never depend on it. For when dependence grows, freedom dies. And freedom, in the end, is worth more than any fleeting taste of sweetness. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. When Aldous Huxley published Brave New World in 1932, he was not simply telling a story. He was warning us. His vision was not a nightmare of dictators and torture chambers, but of a society where people were lulled into obedience by endless comfort. In his imagined world, there were no iron bars, no boots stamping on faces. Instead, there were entertainments, pleasures, and distractions so abundant that no one had the will to rebel. At the center of this system was soma, a pill that erased pain, anxiety, and dissatisfaction. A citizen who felt restless could take it and drift back into bliss. No one questioned authority because no one wanted to. The state did not need violence to control its people. It only needed to keep them entertained, distracted, and content enough never to think deeply about their lives. What makes Huxley's warning so haunting is how closely it mirrors our world today. We may not take soma in pill form, but our society has invented its equivalents. Social media offers constant doses of validation. Streaming platforms provide an endless escape from boredom. Pharmaceuticals promise relief from sadness, sleeplessness, and discomfort. Pleasure is never far away, and distraction is always within reach. The tragedy Huxley described was not that people were forced into slavery, but that they welcomed it. The prison was invisible because it felt good to live inside it. The citizens of his world never stormed the gates of power, not because they lacked the strength, but because they lacked the desire. Who revolts when they are entertained? Who questions authority when their cravings are instantly met? Who seeks truth when illusions are more pleasant? Huxley understood something chilling. The most effective form of control is not pain but pleasure. A tyrant who relies on violence breeds resistance. A system that feeds us pleasure breeds complacency. And once complacency takes root, freedom dies without protest. In this light, Brave New World reads less like fiction and more like prophecy. Huxley was not describing a distant future. He was describing the psychological architecture of a society that could exist anywhere, at any time, if people choose comfort over truth. We like to believe that our freedoms are protected by laws, rights, and institutions, but they are also eroded from within whenever we surrender our critical thought in exchange for distraction. The frightening question is not whether Huxley's world will arrive. It is whether it has already arrived, dressed in the glowing screens and soothing comforts of modern life. His vision forces us to confront the possibility that we are not citizens making free choices, but consumers guided by the invisible hand of pleasure. The lesson here is subtle but crucial. Freedom cannot survive on pleasure alone. It requires struggle, discomfort, and the willingness to see reality clearly, even when it hurts. Huxley's dystopia was never about the destruction of humanity, but about its quiet pacification. A world where we give away our minds not because someone takes them from us, but because we trade them willingly for the shallow thrill of comfort. The psychology of addiction and control. If Huxley showed us the blueprint of a society enslaved by pleasure, psychology explains the machinery behind it. To understand how comfort becomes control, we must first understand the mind's fragile relationship with desire. Modern science reveals what the Stoics already intuited, that the pursuit of pleasure rewires the brain, until freedom is no longer a choice but a distant memory. At the heart of this system is dopamine. Contrary to popular belief, dopamine is not the chemical of pleasure itself but the chemical of anticipation. It is what makes us crave, chase, and repeat. Each notification ping, each new video, each sip of sweetness is a small spark of dopamine. The brain learns quickly. Do this, feel good. But the more often the loop is triggered, the less satisfying each reward becomes. Psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill. What thrilled us yesterday feels dull today, and so we seek a stronger dose tomorrow. The loop spins faster, but fulfillment grows weaker. This cycle is not neutral. It creates dependence. And dependence creates predictability. A person who cannot resist their cravings is a person who can be led by them. It is not hard to see how this predictability becomes a tool of control. Corporations design algorithms that feed our cravings back to us. Governments understand the pacifying effect of entertainment, and social systems reward conformity with validation. We chase what feels good, unaware that we are being guided. The Stoics warned of this thousands of years ago. They practiced voluntary discomfort not as an act of self-denial, but as a way to reclaim control of their minds. By sleeping on hard ground, fasting, or going without luxury, they tested their strength against desire. Marcus Aurelius wrote of the importance of training oneself to endure what others fear and resist what others chase. It was not asceticism for its own sake, but freedom from the leash of compulsion. There are lessons here for our relationships as well. Addiction to pleasure makes us needy, and neediness corrodes intimacy. When love becomes a search for validation, it collapses under its own weight. Stoic wisdom suggests another path: to love others without clinging to them, to value their character rather than the gratification they provide. Seneca reminded his readers that a wise person does not love less deeply but more purely, because their affection is not enslaved by selfish craving. Charisma, too, flourishes when freed from addiction. A person who radiates calm discipline commands respect in ways that desperate charm never can. Epictetus taught that the most magnetic person is not the one who performs for attention, but the one who cannot be swayed by it. True influence is born not from chasing approval, but from mastering the self. The irony is that the less we hunger for recognition, the more others are drawn to us. This, then, is the paradox of pleasure. Promises freedom but delivers chains. It appears to empower but quietly disarms. It feels like choice but functions as control. And once the cycle is internalized, once the brain learns to equate craving with meaning, we become easy to direct, easy to pacify, and easy to own. The danger is not in feeling pleasure, but in failing to recognize how it operates. When pleasure is seen as a gift, it can be enjoyed. When it is mistaken for purpose, it becomes a trap. And in that trap, modern slavery takes root, not through whips or walls, but through the quiet mechanics of addiction. Modern slavery through pleasure slavery today does not look like chains and forced labor. It looks like convenience, like comfort, like entertainment on demand. It is hidden not in prisons but in glowing screens, shopping malls, and endless feeds of distraction. To understand this new slavery, we must see how power operates not by restricting pleasure, but by offering it in abundance. History offers a warning. In ancient Rome, emperors discovered that citizens could be pacified with bread and circuses. Give the people food and entertainment, and they would forget politics, injustice, and corruption. The state did not need to silence them if it could seduce them. The spectacle replaced the struggle. The empire endured not because it was just, but because it was entertaining. Our age has perfected this formula. Where Rome offered gladiators, we have algorithms. Where they offered bread, we have consumption without end. The modern system thrives on our predictability. Every craving is met with a product, every curiosity with a distraction, every discomfort with a soothing substitute. We believe we are choosing freely, but most choices are already laid out for us, designed to exploit our impulses. This is not an accident, it is an economy. The attention economy profits when we cannot look away. Advertising succeeds when we cannot stop wanting. Politics flourishes when citizens are too distracted to demand change. Addiction, distraction, and consumption are not side effects of the system. They are the system. We are kept busy, entertained, and pacified, while the deeper structures of control remain unchallenged. The irony is that pleasure does not liberate us. It makes us passive. A population that seeks comfort above all else will not fight for freedom, because freedom requires struggle, sacrifice, and the courage to endure discomfort. Huxley's prophecy unfolds here. A society that gives away its agency not because it is forced, but because it is bribed with comfort. The consequences stretch into every corner of life. Our relationships become commodified, guided by platforms that promise connection but often deliver only dopamine hits of validation. Our sense of identity becomes entangled with consumption, what we buy, what we wear, what we display. Even our dissent is packaged into trends and sold back to us as entertainment. What feels like individuality is often only another market category. The Stoics would see this clearly. They would tell us that we are not free if our happiness depends on what can be sold to us. They would warn us that the one who cannot live without comfort is the easiest to enslave. Their antidote was not withdrawal from life, but the cultivation of inner strength. By learning to endure discomfort, to embrace simplicity, and to find meaning in virtue rather than consumption, they broke the invisible chains of dependence. Modern slavery thrives because it hides in plain sight. It does not demand submission. It invites it. It tells us to relax, to indulge, to stay comfortable. And yet, every time we give in without reflection, a little more of our freedom slips away. Escaping the cycle of Stoic freedom in modern life. If pleasure has become the quiet architecture of modern slavery, then the question is how to escape it. The answer is not to reject joy or beauty, but to learn how to meet them without becoming dependent. This is where the Stoics offer not only warnings, but a way forward, a set of practices that reclaim freedom in a world built to seduce. The Stoics insisted that freedom is an inner state, cannot be granted by governments, markets, or rulers. It begins with the ability to master one's desires rather than be mastered by them. Epictetus advised his students to distinguish between what is in their control and what is not. Pleasure, wealth, reputation, all these are external. To tie our happiness to them is to give away power. To root happiness in our own reason and character is to become unshakable. In modern life, this principle translates into simple, daily practices. Journaling desires helps us see them clearly, stripping them of their illusionary power. Voluntary discomfort. Choosing to skip a luxury, fast for a day, or sit with boredom reminds us that comfort is optional. Practicing gratitude shifts focus from what we lack to what we already possess. These rituals are not denials of life but exercises in freedom. They weaken the grip of craving and strengthen the muscle of self-command. Applied to relationships, Stoic wisdom teaches us to love deeply but not cling desperately. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that every person we meet is mortal, fragile, and temporary. To love while knowing this truth is to love more honestly, because it is not bound by illusion. Modern relationships often falter because they are built on the expectation of constant pleasure, validation, excitement, novelty. When these fade, affection collapses. Stoic love, by contrast, values the character of the other. It seeks companionship rooted in virtue, not the fleeting intoxication of desire. Charisma, too, finds a different expression through Stoicism. We are taught today to be magnetic by performing, by projecting confidence, by playing roles. But true charisma, the kind that inspires trust and respect, comes from discipline. A person who does not bend to every craving, who remains calm under provocation, radiates a rare presence. Epictetus observed that the one who governs himself is admired more than the one who tries to impress. In a noisy world of performance, self-mastery becomes magnetic. Escaping the cycle of modern slavery, then, is not a matter of withdrawing from life but of living differently within it. It means enjoying pleasure without being ruled by it, participating in society without being consumed by it, and choosing virtue over comfort when the two collide. This does not strip life of joy, it deepens it. Pleasure, when freed from dependence, becomes richer, because it is no longer burdened with the impossible task of giving life meaning. The Stoics believed that the good life was not the easiest life, but the most resilient one. They would remind us that every society faces the temptation of pleasure as control, but every individual has the power to resist. By practicing self-command, by embracing discomfort, by seeking virtue above indulgence, we step out of the invisible prison and reclaim the freedom that cannot be bought, sold, or distracted away. And in this choice lies the most radical act of all, to live not as a servant of pleasure, but as a master of oneself. For in a world that thrives on our distractions, the simple act of living deliberately is the greatest form of rebellion. The story of our age is not written in wars or revolutions, but in something quieter. It is written in the endless scrolling, the craving for validation, the pursuit of comfort that feels harmless but leaves us hollow. Aldous Huxley saw it long before we did, that the real danger is not a tyrant who silences us, but a culture that distracts us until we silence ourselves. The chains of modern slavery are woven not from iron but from pleasure. And yet, there is a way out. The Stoics remind us that freedom begins not with what we consume, but with what we can refuse. To master desire is to break the leash of manipulation. To embrace discomfort is to prove to ourselves that we cannot be bought. To love without clinging, to speak without seeking approval, to live without chasing every craving. These are the acts that restore dignity in a world eager to strip it away. The choice is ours. We can live as comfortable captives, distracted until the end, or as deliberate human beings who see through the illusion. True freedom has always demanded courage. The courage to think, to resist, to endure. And in the end, the most dangerous prison is the one that feels like paradise.